Over the past decade, we have almost been spoiled by the success of the Golden State Warriors. Whether it was their first championship, where they laid the foundation for the fundamental core of their future dynasty, as well as the revolution of the three pointer, to Kevin Durant joining the team and becoming a team that you either love or you love to hate, or in 2022, when this team seemed like they were in the twilight years of that dynasty, and led by an aging Steph Curry, who wins his first Finals MVP, they win their fourth NBA championship under the Steve Kerr era. There were even years in here where, looking at the roster that was surrounding the team, and perhaps a slow start that they got off to, there were question marks about how far that they could go. And even in those moments, they still had memorable games and managed to stay relatively competitive, if not more. And this year, come to the start of it, looked like yet another example of that. We had the loss of Klay Thompson, of course, and Draymond and Steph. They're only getting older, right? And there's not a ton of depth to this roster. You've got Pods going into his second year. You've got Andrew Wiggins, who hadn't seemed to be able to reach that 2022 form again. And there wasn't a lot of depth to the roster. But they start off the year very, very well, and it looked like it was going to be another one of those seasons where whenever you doubt the Warriors, they come back even stronger. And then they had a little bit of a lull period. Things really started to even out for them. They found themselves more towards the middle of the pack than the top of the conference. But then they made a move. They acquired disgruntled Heat star Jimmy Butler. And right now, the Golden State Warriors look as good as they ever have this NBA season. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. And today, the Golden State Warriors are rolling. Starting off here, it's important to highlight and appreciate the man who this whole dynasty revolved around and who has solidified himself as one of the best point guards of all time, if not the best, and that is, of course, Steph Curry, and especially his everlasting longevity. This was someone who, lest we forget, came into the league with a lot of question marks about his ability to lead a team. Even the late 2000s were a much different era than we are in today, and that is in large part due to Steph Curry. But at the time, there were question marks about his shot selection and his ability to be a lead playmaker, not just for himself, but for others especially. This was a time where the NBA was really dominated by the power forward. Whether it was Dirk or it was Tim Duncan or Kevin Garnett, these were the guys that teams felt comfortable building their team around. And as for the point guard position, it was filled with a lot of traditionalists, especially for the best point guards in the league. Guys like Chris Paul, Tony Parker, Rajon Rondo, Steve Nash. These guys who a lot of the time aren't looking for a shot for themselves first. They're looking for shots for others and how they can make their teammates better through actively passing the ball. This was also, of course, a time where the mid-range was much more highly valued than it is currently, and the three-pointer much less valued. And, of course, Steph Curry as a player is contradictory to both of those things. He's not a traditional point guard. He can create for others very, very well, but it's in a different way. Well, a Nash or a CP3 or a Rondo, these guys are actively looking to pass the ball. Steph Curry's going to look for his shot, too. And with that, there could be a little bit of a perception that he's not a great teammate, someone that's going to get all of the guys involved on the court because, hey, he's looking for his shot first and he's got the ball in his hands. But what Steph Curry's able to do is, of course, what comes to be known as his gravity. In debating the playmaking talent of Steph Curry, that is the number one thing that comes up. Because Steph was different from many of the other top point guards in the league at the time, he was able to create plays in a manner in which teams were less prepared to defend. Being a guy who is more than willing to take his own shot, that makes teams have to respect you. And when you're the level of offensive player that Steph Curry would develop into, They have to respect you on every single possession, no matter where you are on the court. So with that added defensive attention, because they're not saying, "Oh, he's just gonna look for a pass first. Let's block the lanes." No, instead, Steph Curry is able to draw defensive attention, draw double teams, and that opens up opportunities for other guys for him to make the assist. And taking a look around the league at the time, I think, of course, when we mention how revolutionary Steph Curry and his playstyle is, there's one obvious point that we're going to get to in a second, but something that I think really deserves to be highlighted is him being that score first point guard, because now you get to the league today, and it seems like most of the point guards are. There's a severe lack of traditionalists, for better or for worse. And even the ones who are really, really good passers, like a Trae Young or a Tyrese Halliburton, these are guys who are more than comfortable seeking their own shot. And for a long time, there was kind of this perception that these two things were not mutually beneficial, your scoring and your playmaking. There was this idea that you were either a great scorer or a great passer, and there was not much middle ground there. But when you're a great scorer, it draws defensive attention on you so that you can become a great passer. And if you're a great passer, teams have to respect the passing lanes. And with that, that opens up opportunities for you to score the ball. These two things are in fact complementary as opposed to contradictory. And then, of course, the other point that Steph Curry brought about was, of course, the three-pointer. Coming into the league, this was a time where the mid-range, even long ones, were heavily emphasized, overtaking maybe just one step back to make it worth one more point. And as we have developed further into the digital age and advanced analytics have become more and more popular, one metric that is particularly notable in this instance is the points per weighted shot, which have come to determine that the most efficient shots in basketball are a layup, someone at the rim, or a three-pointer, because that three, while it's further back, it's also worth one more point. Meanwhile, the mid-range kind of gets left out because you're still creating distance from yourself in the basket, but it's still only worth 2 points. And Steph Curry and the Warriors were the first team to really experience success with that three-pointer, and teams always follow the winners in the manner in which they do so because they want to get a piece of that championship gold themselves. And the Warriors really set the precedent for the three-point revolution. So that's the impact that Steph Curry's had. I really wanted to highlight the fact of the score first guard because I feel like so often that doesn't get brought up. Of course, you talk about the three-pointer all the time, but on Save the Association, I try to kind of open up different perspectives and ideas. So I really want to highlight that part. And then we get to where Steph Curry is now and his everlasting longevity. And that has been a major, major factor for this team this year because Curry only seems to get better with age. Of course, early on in his career, he dealt with some injuries. And then, of course, he would go on to become the player that we all know him as. But at some point, there's expected to be a little bit of a drop-off, a little bit of a decline. He currently is 36 years old, about to turn 37. And by that point in time, most players at that age, even all-time greats, are starting to show signs of decline, if not being fully out of the league or on the precipice of that. But it seems like annually, Steph Curry is able to add these new dynamics to his game. Particularly early on in his career, he was known for being a pretty bad defender, but as time has gone on, while he is still limited in that capacity, he's added to his frame that has helped him immensely. And as the years go by, yes, his athleticism may decline. He had a dunk the other day, said it might be his last one ever. His game has a unique ability to age well because one thing that you don't lose as quickly is your jump shot. And that is what made Steph Curry the player that he is today. And if Steph Curry was not the level of player that he still is, we would be having entirely different conversations about the Golden State Warriors. And one more thing I want to highlight here about how his game is just aged like a fine wine is basketball IQ. Because, like I said earlier, yes, of course, Steph, his game is predicated on the jump shot. But as your athleticism declines, what only grows is your basketball IQ. Because not only do you gain that from experience playing the game, but it also grows exponentially when you get to a point where you're not the same level of athlete that you might have been previously. Maybe driving to the lane doesn't come as easy to you, and you aren't able to do some of the things that you were able to do earlier on. Your basketball IQ only grows because now you have to find new ways to still be as effective as you once were as you're getting older, as your body is just naturally becoming a little bit less athletic, even though he's, of course, still in the top 0.1% of athletes in the entire world. Your basketball IQ only grows as you gain not just experience, but your athleticism might decline a little bit. And you just find new ways and new dynamics to affect the game at a high level. Or at the bare minimum, that's what the best players do. And Steph Curry is a generational talent. So in mentioning Steph Curry first here, this is the guy that sets the tone for the entire team, and his level of production, his level of play at his age is simply remarkable, and he is such a vital cog that makes everything within the Warriors flow. But one man can't do it all by himself. The Warriors started off the year very, very well, and as time went on, they descended more and more to a middling record. But then they made a move to rejuvenate and revitalize this team. And that, of course, came with the addition of Jimmy Butler, who has fit in near seamlessly with the Golden State Warriors. This Golden State Warriors team is, of course, a few years removed from when they won their last championship, and it's a team that has experienced a lot of changes since then. Whether it's the loss of Klay Thompson or up until the trade for Butler, the declining play of Andrew Wiggins, who had been the second best player on that team in many people's eyes. But Wiggins wasn't performing as well as he had during the finals run in the coming years. And when you've got Curry still playing at a very high level, and Draymond, of course, being a defensive leader for this team, as well as the loss of Klay Thompson, you have to make a change. You don't want to end up in a situation like the Chicago Bulls, a team that is consistently afraid to take risks. And as a result of that, they might hover around being a play-in, playoff team, but never much more to where they're in championship contention, or never much less to where they can actually get a high draft pick. You don't want to end up in that situation because at that point, you're not necessarily building towards anything in the future, but you're also not doing anything in the moment necessarily, making any major waves. And the Golden State Warriors recognized that, and they didn't want to just throw away the final years of the career of Steph Curry by just being happy with him being a source of ticket sales and entertainment and just balling out, but to no real proper team success, to no true contention. Instead, Wiggins is gone now too, and in comes Jimmy Butler at that forward spot. This is someone who just had a cycle of major drama with the Miami Heat. And there was some criticism of his character, particularly from the Miami Heat organization and the front office. But with that, if there is ever anything that is apparent about Jimmy Butler, it is his desire to win. And up to this point in his career, he has never gotten that finals trophy. But he has done everything that he can to put his team in a position to win. You, of course, have the infamous NBA bubble in which the Miami Heat simply outperformed and were more prepared than most other teams. A lot of teams and even individual players felt as though the bubble was this space of isolation and one that really was not good for the mental health of them, and that kind of seeped into the play on the court. But the Miami Heat, they were hungry and they were ready to take advantage of that and to show up motivated and with a desire to not just compete, but to win. And they go on to make the NBA Finals. in an uber impressive effort, which all started by the leadership of the number one option on that team, of course, being Jimmy Butler. And in a post game press conference with the Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler would go on to state how he had kind of lost his joy in playing basketball and that he could not find it there in Miami. And winning is ultimately what drives Jimmy Butler, and he felt like he could not do that with the Heat. Then at the same time, you've got the Warriors in a little bit of a slump, and it seems like a match made in heaven when the trade occurs. Someone who just wants to win, to be on a team that even has the ability to be in contention, because the Miami Heat, they became too complacent, in Jimmy Butler's eyes at least. And then on the other end, you have the Golden State Warriors who want to do everything that they can to maximize the final years of Steph Curry. And then, of course, that brings us to where we are today, where in the last 10 games, the Warriors are 8-2. And this team had been in a slump, but with the addition of Jimmy Butler, it takes everything on this team to a new level, a new dynamic. Because after the hot start the Warriors had to slumping a little bit, there was kind of this expectation that it might be a little bit of a lost year for Golden State. And with that, it becomes harder for everyone to buy in completely. Now, the best players always find a desire and a motivation to play and compete, but think about the supporting cast. If they feel like their contributions are not going towards anything greater, especially when, as a role player, your impact is truly only going to be noticed if you're one of the best in the league or you're a crucial part of a championship level team. It becomes harder for the players surrounding the stars to buy in just a little bit. But with the addition of Jimmy Butler, all of a sudden it sets the tone that there is someone to play for. This is someone who wants to win and compete at the highest level. And Steph Curry, for as well as he is aged, is by his standards having a little bit of a down season. But even now, we're seeing a little bit of that vintage Steph Curry, including a game where he hit 12 threes and hit over 50 points. When you add another player alongside him, an all-star caliber player alongside him in Jimmy Butler, it makes everything easier for a player like Steph Curry. Because on one hand, Jimmy Butler is a very capable defender. More than capable. And you pair him with one of the highest IQ defensive players and one of the best defensive leaders that we've ever seen in Draymond Green. That is absolutely a unit to be feared. And then on the offensive end, as good as Wiggins could be in spurts, and as he had shown flashes in, especially during that championship run a couple years ago, Jimmy Butler, when he is bought in, is just an entirely different level of player. And with teams having to focus their attention on him, that creates more opportunities for Curry. And if they're guarding up on Curry, he's got yet another option that he can trust with the ball in his hands. And so to conclude this, the Golden State Warriors are on fire right now. And in large part, that is due to Jimmy Butler. He has brought back that competitive fire to this team that could have maybe been lost in their descent into mediocrity this season. But they look as good as they ever have this year, and they are rolling currently. Steph Curry, we all know that he has revolutionized the game to a level that very few, if any, players can replicate. And as time has gone on, he has shown incredible longevity. But with the addition of Butler, we are now seeing vintage Curry performances. Everyone is bought in on this team, and they look like they're back to that form that they were in to start off the season. And no matter how the roster looks for Golden State, no matter how much you might question the loss of a guy like Klay Thompson, no matter how much you might question the roster around Steph Curry, how long that he can keep doing this, whenever you doubt the Golden State Warriors, they seem to be at their strongest. And what the ceiling of this team is, only time will tell, especially in a loaded Western Conference with so much talent across the board. that seems like there's quite a few teams that you could make a case for. No matter what the ceiling of this team is, the Warriors organization took the initiative to be bold and make a move and not just sit back and watch the final years of Steph Curry, but to actually go through it and remain competitive, not just there for the nostalgia of it, for the entertainment of it, but to make it mean something. And that's very, very admirable. It was a season that started off sky high for the Golden State Warriors, but they flew a little bit too close to the sun and they fell down a little bit. But now they're coming right back up. And this time, they believe that they can reach the sun. And that is all for today's episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you very, very much for listening. The Golden State Warriors are rolling right now. And this episode I quite enjoyed. I think recently I haven't loved some of the stuff I've put out. And that's kind of been seen in the performance of some things. It's low-key demoralizing sometimes when something that you were really, really proud of only goes on to get just not very many listens as previous things had, even if you feel like the quality might be even better. But ultimately, I do have a group of regular followers over here, and I'm very thankful for all of them. And I think this one has the potential to be very, very good. And if this was your first introduction, I hope it came across well. I think this is one I'm very proud of, and just not being too worried about the performance necessarily. I'd love for it to do well, but just be worried about the product that's coming out there. So we're gonna probably have some changes coming over to State of the Association, and it's all just for the sake of making the content better and not being so focused on the performance, but in crafting something that is truly special, because that's what gets out there. That's what people see. That's what people notice. And this is something that I really was passionate about and I enjoyed doing today. I hope it came across well. If this was your first introduction, I hope you made it this far. I hope it was quite enjoyable. And if this is something you're interested in, trying to bring in new perspectives to the sport of basketball as well as football, and bringing storytelling back to sports journalism, as Ryan Windhorst stated that it's kind of a lost art. I hope this was a great introduction to State of the Association, and you might be able to stick around. And if you're just returning, thank you very much if you made it this far. I appreciate all of you so much. It's all about getting the quality right now. Thank you very much. This has been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.